So this next slide, I'm turning to, first I thought I'd cover some things that could be done without any new technologies and new policies within the existing portfolio and the latitude we have. And I'm not expecting anybody to be able to read what's on the bottom column here, but this is the spread of different cost effectiveness of a number of many of the programs, the resource programs in PG&E's 2015 portfolio, and the red line is the 1.0, the break-even benefit cost ratio. And as you can see, there are not that many programs to the right above that go above 1.0, and there are many that don't reach it, and there are a lot of reasons for that. Probably a significant one is that the Commission sets pretty aggressive goals for the utilities, and they need to try to get to them, and they take advantage of some of these resource programs that may not be cost effective but that do deliver savings, and balance that against the ones that are highly cost effective to hit the goals. Now, the potential studies we use to devise these goals are only for cost-effective measures. So, but of course, you can't hit every one. So there's some trade-offs happening here. But certainly, setting these aggressive goals put the utilities in a position where they have to include in their portfolios perhaps a number of programs that don't make the cut. Some of these are programs that may be up and coming, and that's why we encourage the utility. We develop cost effectiveness on a portfolio basis. We want the utilities to have the flexibility to try some new things. But I'm quite sure that many of these don't fit that bill and have been around a long time and don't show promise of coming down in price and being more cost effective over time. So the question is, I firmly believe that we could take a closer look at these programs. And dealing with the inertia of defunding some and moving them to more cost-effective ones would give us more bang for the buck and deliver more savings. So, and this moves on to the dreaded net-to-gross ratios and free ridership question. This is a table that shows for the large projects. I don't have a separate one for buildings. This is a mix of industrial processes and buildings all the way from 1998. And these net-to-gross ratios hover in the 50% range. And what this means is, 1 minus this is somebody who says, I was going to do it anyway. Thanks for the incentive, but it was already in our capital plans, or, yeah, I had this in mind. And again, this is long before the PUC took over evaluations. The utilities conducted most of these or oversaw most of these evaluations themselves. And there are a lot of reasons for this. And again, I think one of them is the aggressive goals that we set for them, and those are gross goals, so they have a need to try to get as many.
Okay, I still don't know quite what the net to gross is. Does this mean 50% more or less are free riders? Or?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So what net to gross is the inverse. So 1 minus net to gross is how many free riders you have.
Okay. So
the net over the gross.
Roughly over the years, about 50% of the people say they would have done these things anyway.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And there are real reasons, and it's hard to get a different outcome. These are expensive projects. This industry tries to get, and I think succeeds in many instances to get entities educated and doing something they wouldn't have done anyway. But at least for the past 25 years in these programs, or 18 years, a lot of what's happening is, or about half of what's happening is arguably something that was going to happen anyway. And these customers pay into these programs too. So how do you say no to that? It's a challenging nut to crack. On top of that, though, just at the gross level, there's another factor, which is that this question of how much do the models, what actually gets delivered, and that's again a pretty big discount. There's about historically 60% gross rate of predicted estimated savings or actual savings compared to estimated. So if you multiply those together, you wind up with somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 cents on the dollar of net results for the gross dollar spent, if you will. And we're always going to have some of this. We have to accept that these programs are not going to be able to just come in and only hit the customers that would not have done this anyway. But I think there's plenty of room to work between that 30 and 40 cents on the dollar. We could double that and still have plenty of room for some amount of free ridership and inaccuracy in our forecast. So I think there's room to work here. And just to this question of how much money we spend at the commission trying to figure this out, it's a very small. So it is true that the evaluation budgets are $40 million of the $1 billion a year, about 4%. Half of that goes to process evaluations, mostly conducted by the utilities to help improve their programs. The potential study and market studies. So the actual evaluation piece of that is about $20 million, and I'd be hard pressed to imagine even a quarter of that goes to this attribution question. So we're talking about less than half of 1%. Now, that might Ms. Bytel might be conflating this ex post evaluation and surveys with the ex ante process of going out and trying to figure out for these, particularly these big ticket projects, whether the customer is doing something that is pretty standard practice in the industry, because there's a real risk of paying one entity to do something that is pretty standard practice at this point in the industry, and there's a moral hazard there over time. Well, it's kind of a bad idea to do that because other people in the industry are going to start expecting that too. So, there's two sides to this. One is trying to push people to do a lot more than what's standard. The other is to bring the laggards along, and that second one bears a lot more risk of outcomes like a randomized control trial telling us that this would have happened anyway. So.
Great. Well, I think now I understand your graph.
What's that?
Now I understand your graph. Thank you.
Yes. So moving on to this, there are a lot of numbers on this, and I don't intend to spend a whole lot of time on them. But the high level, what we're, I know you have a lot of interest in air conditioning and HVAC, and this is just a sample of what's the problem we're trying to solve here and how are we going to do it, and to offer some ideas of how we might do it differently. So the first row here is the standard two-code residential AC unit. It's about $4,800, and the savings that it delivers about 500 kilowatt hours a year. And then you move to the higher rated Sears units, and you quickly see that the payback to go to those higher units, even at $400, the amount of additional savings you get, the payback period is 43 years. For the next, even jumping up to a much more efficient unit, the payback period is 39 years. This notion that we're going to encourage somebody to early retire, like a unit that's still got 7 or 8 years of life left from the mid-90s, it doesn't really kind of pencil on its own, certainly from a rebate perspective. And this next slide shows that. So some of the typical rebates in some of the programs we have, a $750 quality install or a $400 per ton early retirement rebate. It moves it down a little bit. You get down to 33-year pay, or 30-year paybacks, but it's not really likely to induce many people to replace rather than pay for a repair of a unit that might still have 5 or 10 years left in it. So the question that the potential solutions that this suggests are, maybe it's more important if we want that early retirement to figure out how to convince that person to spend that $5,000 or regardless of whether it's $5,000 or $7,000, get access to financing to accomplish that, because that's far more likely to induce a change than a meaningful change than a rebate in the neighborhood of what we've been offering. Or at least if we're going to do the rebates, maybe we don't do it for some of the just slightly above the code SEER units, and we actually drop down and offer a much richer incentive for a more aggressive rebate. And again, right now, almost everything above the code is being rebated because the utilities have very aggressive goals to meet, and so they kind of blanket the opportunities that are out there. So. And then maybe we want to look at ways to look at the repair and encourage people who are in the contractors who are doing a lot of these repairs to have compressors that are high quality in their vans, stocked with repair kits that would actually address the kind of problems we see in some of the more inefficient units that we know are out there from the 90s and early 2000s and are likely to be around a while longer. So some other ideas, ways to approach this AC challenge. So with that, I'm going to turn. So those are all things that we could do without any policy changes, and I want to move on to a few bigger ideas. And again, I'm a staff at the commission. I don't speak for the commission. It speaks through its decisions. So these are just some ideas that I've come up with after 5 years of looking at this question. One is that, and they kind of go from the highest level to the most wonkiest at the bottom. So different goals for different strategies is one idea. We have this, recall from the first slide, a red dot for kilowatt hours for that entire year for the portfolio. That's a very rigid way to encourage for utilities and other administrators to develop programs towards that dot. Different types of strategies, ones that address some of the issues that Dr. Siminovich was speaking to earlier, and others require different time horizons. And savings get measured in different ways when you throw a piece of equipment in versus going after a behavioral change. So an argument is that we may need different programs that have different goals and cost-effectiveness approaches, rather than having just this one goal that the utilities are forced to target and scramble towards every year. Another is the use of it's been touched on before, the use of big data and remote audits to target high opportunity buildings. And that actually gets at this free ridership question in a nice way, because it's much more proactive. You are looking at high opportunities, you're finding the laggards or the entities that are not investing in their residences or commercial buildings, and you're actively reaching out to them with a value proposition that, you've got a lot of old stuff here and we can offer you a pretty good rebate to go after it. And you get far fewer free riders that way. So I think there's a lot of promise in that approach. Replacing the rebate focus with education and project financing, I've touched on this a little bit. I think that particularly with larger use customers, working with them on strategic energy management plans and longer-term plans that incorporate energy efficiency, demand response, different rate tariffs, and their interplay is a promising way for the utilities to be approaching this. And when it comes to project financing, there's both finding additional sources of money that don't reach into other alternatives that businesses have to do with their capital. And then there's also a new proposal that the Utility Reform Network has been floating lately that looks, I call it ESCO 2.0. The ESCOs are the energy service provider models that come in and do a job and under contract with a customer, and they pay for the job out of the savings that occur between the bills. And am I way over time here? Is that what you're getting anxious about? I can hold off.
If this is your last slide?
This is it.
Okay. Yeah. Just finish the rest. Other people have given you a little bit more time by finish earlier. So just finish the graph.
Cool. Thank you. And apologies. Right, so this ESCO 2.0 idea is to use a more advanced meter that some of the challenges that the ESCOs had were building energy use changes would occur, the contract would be fuzzy, and there would be really challenges with the counterparty as their bill went up with ESCO saying, well, we didn't cause that, you've done something in your build, you're doing something different with your energy use, and it's not our fault, you still have to pay us. So what this new meter technologies allow us to do is to get a more refined understanding at an interval level of what's going on and what the changes are. It sends a signal to the ESCO on a real-time basis, what's going wrong in the building, and is it our fault? Should we go out and do something about it? Or no, there's a use change. And it also brings in the utility potentially. Instead of offering a rebate, the utility comes into this contractual arrangement and deals with this delta between what the bill would have been using this delta meter and what's actually the energy use bill is, and through a relatively complicated set of contracts with the different entities, the utility essentially supports this work just like it would building a new power plant, but instead it's building energy efficiency, it's supporting energy efficiency buildings particularly in the large commercial setting. Finally, some changes to the cost effectiveness tests that are worth looking at. One is the avoided renewable integration costs. We do factor already the renewable integration into our avoided cost calculators, but the cost of integrating these intermittent renewables as they get pretty significant portion of the grid is not yet in our tests. And then there's the speaking to the LED question and how we could make those pencil better in the portfolio. the fact that they have such longer lives, and therefore the customer is avoiding buying 2 or 3 CFLs or incandescents along the way, and the LED life cycle is not captured in the way we run our tests are set up now, and that'd certainly be something we should be looking at.
Great. All right. So as you say, a lot of what you're talking about here was anticipated by other speakers, and these are some great points, and we should talk sometime about the future, about what can be done to implement some of the things you've discussed. I do think they have great relevance, so thank you. Is it Dr. Miller?
No, it's not.
Oh, Mr. Miller?
That'll work.
Go right ahead.
Or Peter.
So from the Mr. Miller again, just to review, is from is a senior scientist at the NRDC with 25 years of experience in science-based energy and climate programs. Good.
Thank you. Thank you, Senator Merrick. Very much appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. And it's the end of a long set of panels. So I want to try and take the opportunity to sum up a little bit what you've heard today as the last speaker on energy efficiency, and avoid trying to respond too much to earlier comments. There's a lot of interesting issues that have come up, but I thought it might be useful to try and just provide an overview of what we've been able to accomplish with energy efficiency over the really 4 decades that California's been engaged in this effort. We've avoided...
And if you could particularly talk about what you'd like to see us do in the future. That's really key.
Well, let me run quickly through the summary, and then I'll get onto that, because I think that absolutely, that's where do we go from here is the key question. So appreciate that. We've accomplished a lot. I'll say that we've accomplished tens of billions of dollars in savings for customers. The state's codes, building codes and appliance standards alone have saved customers $75 billion since they were started in the 70s. That's a huge accomplishment. The state agencies deserve enormous credit for that. We've helped low-income customers and disadvantaged communities reduce their bills and save money. That's critically important. We've served 3 million low-income households alone since 2003. We've created good jobs. More than 300,000 jobs in the state, or nearly 70% of clean energy jobs, are related to improving building energy efficiency. And in this effort, there's broad participation from a wide range of different industry groups, from utilities, the building industry, from cities and counties, municipalities, schools and hospitals, homeowners, and commercial building managers. So this is a really broad effort. It involves a lot of activity across the state, and it's provided benefits to industry and to homeowners that help support our economy. It's an impressive record of accomplishments. But as you know, there's plenty more to do, and the key question is, where do we go from here? We've got a set of existing mandates in place. We've got the state's loading order that says energy efficiency is the let's see if I can get this out, the fastest, cleanest, cheapest resource that we have, and we should rely on it first. That's what the loading order says. Energy efficiency is the top loading order. Let's do that first. Let's do the cheapest, cleanest thing, cleanest, fastest thing first. We've got the state's commitment to acting on climate change, AB 32, and related programs. Energy efficiency is a key part of the state's commitment to responding to the threat of catastrophic climate change. More recently, we have 2 bills that were passed last year, SB 350 and AB 802. I wish I could thank Assemblymember Williams. He's already left. But those 2 bills directed the state to double its effort effectively on energy efficiency in buildings and to refocus on existing buildings, in particular looking at what we can do to improve the efficiency of existing buildings through benchmarking, disclosure, and other programs to bring the efficiency of existing buildings up to snuff. So getting to your question now, how do we move forward? What are the key opportunities? I want to identify 5 different areas of opportunity. And they're summarized in the issue brief that was distributed to the committee earlier. 1, provide strategic guidance. And other commenters have noted this as well. We need to focus, we need to move towards a more collaborative, integrated, statewide, and even regionally consistent approach. We need integrated solutions. And there are a number of initiatives underway in this regard. Annette Bidell mentioned the California Technical Forum, which is a collaborative forum. It parallels a forum in the Northwest, and it allows us to move forward in a coordinated and consistent way. There's the Demand Analysis Working Group, which is a stakeholder-based collaborative forum that's hosted by the Energy Commission. And then there's the coordinating committee now that's working on the rolling portfolio approach to energy efficiency portfolio planning and design that the PUC is responsible for. Those are all good examples of that kind of integrated, collaborative efforts. We need to clarify roles. We need a clear and shared vision of how we're going to move forward. And I look to the state's decision makers, starting with the governor, the legislature, and appointed officials, commissioners at both commissioners, to do that, to bring their leadership forward. And then we need to prioritize and focus. There's an enormous amount of opportunities out there. Energy efficiency has been described as not a silver bullet, but silver buckshot. We need to prioritize and focus our efforts so we're working on the best opportunities first and moving forward in a coordinated way. So that's one, strategic guidance. Be strategic. Two, let's align our policies, our energy efficiency policies, with our broad economic and environmental goals. Energy efficiency is important, but it's got to be placed in the context of our broad environmental goals, climate change, reduced air pollution, and our economic goals. Grow the state's economy, create good jobs. So we need to do that. How can we do that? We can do it by fully valuing energy efficiency, by improving our evaluation. This has certainly been an issue that's come up today. By looking at the full potential. Let's look at the full range of opportunities that are out there, new technologies and new markets. And then finally integrate, and this is critical, really integrate our planning and our program work into our resource planning. So efficiency is important in that by avoiding the need for other dirtier and more expensive resources. We don't want efficiency just for its own sake. We want it because it saves money and avoids those other resources that we'd otherwise have to build. So we have to make sure that when we do efficiency, we're accounting for the benefits and avoiding the need and avoiding the construction of those other resources. The third point, expand access for all customers. So it's really important that efficiency not be just for a small group of the state's citizens. There's value and opportunity across the state in wealthy communities as well as disadvantaged communities, for residences as well as businesses, for farms and for factories. So we need to get into disadvantaged neighborhoods. We need to get in small businesses. We need to get into rural communities. These hard to reach or harder to reach targets are often, the thing that's next, but not the thing that we're doing today. And I think we need to really focus our efforts so that we are getting to those up front, that we really take the time and the effort to get to those hard to reach targets now and not put it off for another day. Fourth, we need to continue and accelerate, in fact, our building codes and appliance standards work. And the Energy Commission just recently adopted a new upgrade, a new set of standards, and they've been doing some great work lately, but we need to continue to do that. And as part of it, we need to move to more integrated building approaches. We also need to focus on a compliance strategy. It's not enough to just pass the standard here in Sacramento, but we need to make sure that there's actual implementation at the local level. And we need to support counties and municipalities in enforcing the standards. And finally, and this is really my favorite one, is we need to foster creative solutions. And it's an age of innovation. It's no less true in energy efficiency than in other areas. There's a lot of great ideas out there, great opportunities, new technologies. And I just want to highlight a couple of them because they've come up before, but I think there's some really neat stuff out there. So benchmarking is one of them. And other folks have mentioned this. We now have an ability, because of the smart meters and advanced analytical techniques, to look much more carefully at the data that's coming out of buildings, at the information, and figure out what's going on in that building, at individual buildings, on a real-time basis, and say, here's an opportunity. That chiller's not operating correctly. Maybe it's just that they added new staff, and that's why the energy went up. But to figure out what's going on in individual buildings and take action to address them. And then to use that data as well to create market pressure to advance energy efficiency. So if a commercial building owner is trying to get tenants, they're trying to lease their building, and they're not that attractive relative to other buildings in terms of their energy costs, that's useful information for the market, for prospective tenants, and a way to put pressure on the building owner to upgrade his building so he can rank in the top 10 or whatever their target is. Plug-in equipment, or PIE, P-I-E, is the fastest growing source of electricity demand. There's something like 50 devices, plugged-in devices per home, and it accounts for 2/3 of all electricity use in homes. But it only accounts for 7% of our program savings. There's a big opportunity out there. And it's challenging to reach because there's a lot of small devices and a lot of new devices. So set-top boxes and game consoles and a lot of things that I don't even know about, but I'm sure my kids could tell you about, that are coming out. And there's opportunities there. You have to be nimble because markets and technologies change very rapidly. And so we have to be nimble at going after those, but there's a lot of opportunity, and it is the fastest growing use in the future. So we really need to focus on that. Another thing that's come up earlier is this idea of pay for performance, where we create an opportunity for companies to come in and say, I'm going to go to this home or business, and we're going to work with them to reduce their energy use, and we're going to be able to measure that and report it in real time, so that we've got a measured baseline, and we've got their measured consumption, and we're comparing those and showing the savings. So you've certainly made clear your preference for actual data. That's something that I think a lot of folks, including NRDC, support. And this is a way to make use of that and the analytical capability that we have to provide a business opportunity and an opportunity for customers to provide savings. I'll close in just a second. Other opportunities that have come up, the so-called BRO programs, if you will, behavior, retro-commissioning, and operational savings. It's not just important to look at the buildings themselves, but it's how they're used with occupants in them, how people behave, and the opportunities to change the operation of the buildings to provide savings. Both of those were highlighted in AB 802 and 350, and we think there's some real opportunities there. There's new delivery mechanisms that we can look at, all-source bidding, integrating energy efficiency with demand response programs. And then finally, just want to highlight a program we've got in the state, the EPIC program, the Electric Program Investment Charge, which provides over $150 million in clean energy RD&D. That's run by the Energy Commission. It's a fabulous program, and it keeps new technologies coming to the market. If you would permit me, that's all I got prepared. I do think that there's one key point that's come up.
Go ahead.
I think the one thing that we have to be careful about, now you've heard about the challenges with energy efficiency evaluation. And they fundamentally stem from the fact that you can't measure energy efficiency directly. You have to compare what happened to your projection of what would have happened. You can't measure what would have happened because it didn't happen. And in doing so, it's really important to be careful about generalization. And I think, in particular, the study that Dr. Wolfram mentioned earlier is a good example of that. Now, it's a good study, but it's one study for one program in one location. It was an ARA-funded program. It was focused not just on energy efficiency, but on economic development as, a key objective of ARA. There were other benefits from that program. In particular, when they went to people's homes, they did health and safety improvements. So, like mold abatement or asbestos removal. So, the cost of those improvements added 25% to the cost of the program. In each home, instead of $4,000 per home, it was $5,000 per home, another $1,000 per home, just for those health and safety improvements. Those are valuable improvements. They provided a more livable home for those folks, but they didn't provide energy savings. It was also an expensive program because it was rolled out very quickly. Shovel ready, let's move forward with these really quickly. So it was more expensive than the typical WAP program. And the customers were not typical of the typical WAP program as well. Marketing costs are high, and to get that many people in quickly, as Dr. Wolfram pointed out, was expensive and difficult. So I just want to point your attention to a much more comprehensive study that was done by the Oak Ridge National Laboratory that looked at WAP, the weatherization program, more generally. It's a peer-reviewed study. They looked at more years, more sites, a broader perspective on the overall program. It found that the program was cost-effective, cost-benefit ratio of 1.2 to 1 in terms of based on actual savings. Now, the point you made about the need to calibrate engineering models, absolutely critical.
Right.
Absolutely
That's
critical.
really my main point here.
Yeah. And I think the interesting thing, absolutely, absolutely a good point. I don't think we can ever get away from engineering models entirely. And in fact, the kind of Bayesian models that folks are moving towards.
We absolutely need them. They just need to be better.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not going to, we can't do the trade-offs by, looking at individual cases. We need the computer codes. We just need them to be better. We also need them to be better because people like me or my assistant Miranda make decisions in our homes, and then we see that the payoffs aren't there.
Yeah.
And so they need to be better for a variety of reasons. You wanted to say something, Mr. Scala?
Yeah, just regarding that, and recalling that there was this question that I think Dr. Wolfram was asked about, do you know why these home upgrade programs? So there's the model, which is the shell, which is the and then there are the assumptions that go into the model. And I think in a lot of cases the problem, and I think in the home upgrade programs, the initial problem was the preset defaults that did overpredict the amount of use, particularly electricity use, but both use in a home before it got treated. So as a result, the post-treated, the calculation assumed so much more energy was being used based on those default assumptions that
Right.
you didn't get the deltas that you thought you were going to
No,
get.
there's no doubt that they have said, in fact, that was the big problem.
Yeah.
Not that the energy use afterwards was particularly different. The problem was in the codes prior to the retrofits.
Right.
And so that's something, it's just something that has to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed before we can know the most cost-effective way to spend our money. And I can list you a variety of things that I think, and so did a number of the people here, like you're saying the single pane isn't very effective, but most people who don't want to sit near cold windows, so they put drapes up. Those sorts of things are hard to do, but we need to do a better job of considering all of those things. So there's just a lot that needs to be looked into, and we need to do it. And we need to have, again, the California study, less well, in no sense a randomized study, but still did rely on actual data, and it said that the codes weren't doing a great job. So we just have to fix that so we can make better decisions. And we also need to look at the trade-offs between the various ways we can go. Is it better to put to do more renewable natural gas on the grid, or is it better to fix up the things in the home so you use less natural gas there? And I'm not going to say what the right answer is, but I just think we have to have the right tools to make the right trade-offs.
And I think the IRP component of SB 350, the integrated resource planning tool that will be coming into existence down the road, is going to try to endeavor to do that, but it's going to need good inputs in order to do that right, which is your point.
So let me say one other thing, which is I've heard, the most interesting thing was trying to look at big data, trying to come up with the right targets. You mentioned that, Mr. Scala. I also heard from Dr. Simonovich the fact that controls on lighting can be just as important or more so than how efficient the lighting is. And the thing that I need to know is, are these things that can be done through the bureaucracy? Are these changes that are going to happen already? Are these things where I need to talk to the commissioners and make them aware of these things? Are these things that we need legislation for? So from all of you here, I really need to know what the next steps are. What should we be doing next? And if you have an answer for that, I'm glad to hear it. Go ahead.
This is David Shukian. Just you heard Dr. Simonovich talk about a slight rolling back of our standards. And one of the things that we did in 2013 was we adopted more aggressive efficiency standards for retrofitting commercial buildings. That required, during certain operations, a rewiring of the light switches, and that is what drove the cost up for retrofits. That changed a lot of business operations to make it less cost effective, and therefore a lot of companies said, no, we're just not going to do that measure. We adopted a alternative for 2016 that provides another option. You can still do the switch as we had originally adopted in 2013, but we're saying, look, if you don't want to put that switch in, you can go and put more efficient lighting in the actual fixture to provide similar and actually even greater savings if you do it that way. Again, it's a matter of providing flexibility so that the marketplace can adjust and achieve those savings that you are trying to achieve. We are every year looking at the most cost-effective measures that we can adopt as requirements, but we have to look at that balance as well as to how much do we affect the marketplace as well.
Yeah. Well, I believe Dr. Simonovich also pointed out that there were cost-effective ways to put in these controls. But let's not get into that in detail right now. So we're now coming to the public comment section. And how many people here would like to make a public comment? Anyone want to make a public comment? I can give you a lot of time now. We have time. Okay, so we're not going to have public comments. Look, these have been great panels. I've learned a lot. And there are great opportunities in energy conservation, and we've got to make a real effort. I would hope that if the commissions you two recommend, or the NRDC feels that we have to advance in particular ways that need legislation, or needs for me to talk to various commissioners to make them aware of opportunities, I am happy to do that. So, and I can speak for many of my fellow assembly members and senators who are really concerned about making these programs work and taking full advantage of everything and making the product trade-off. So, again, thank you very much. I've learned a lot today, and thank you very much for all the speakers for taking a day of your time and spending it here. I really appreciate it. Thank you.